been a crazy, crazy wet old week here in Coffs Harbour with the skies opening up and dumping rain all over my farm. So I've decided to get in on the act and bring a further 2,000 litres of water into my fish shed. But hopefully that water is going to stay confined within the walls of my brand new Plywood Aquarium. That's right, it's time to do a water test, a leak test on my Gold Coast Seaway themed Plywood Aquarium. Funny when you start looking for leaks, you start to actually second guess any little stain that's on the timber and wonder if it's actually wetness, just like this. And that's actually not wetness, that's a big black mark on the timber itself that I never actually recognised before. Kind of expecting to see that leak, but you're also really hoping that there's not. So while this tank fills up with fresh water, how about we go through the costs that I incurred, the money I spent. So previously, I was at $1,251.46. One of the most obvious expenses is actually the glass, funnily enough, in a Plywood Aquarium build. Now this glass I found on Marketplace for $150 for both panes of glass, which was actually a really, really good deal. This is 15mm ultra clear float glass. I had two panels for that price. Each were 2.440 millimeters long and 720 millimeters high. I had one pane cut in half, which was to form this end and that end of the aquarium. So it actually worked out perfectly. And my word of advice for you, if you are going to build a Plywood aquarium, like I've said before, is to source your glass first and build your tank size ideally around the glass that you have. If you just decide upon the size tank that you wish to build, get stuck into the timber work and the epoxy and then try and find the glass to suit, invariably, I guarantee you, you'll find yourself at the glazier shop getting custom glass cut, and that's gonna cost you. I spent $342 on the actual stainless steel angle and the flat bar that you saw me install as an edge board at the rear of that corner and the rear of the corner on the other side there. $144.51 in silicone, which is actually one of those expenses that not many people think of when they're building an aquarium. I spent $138.83 in sanding discs and pads. I also spent $12.13 in some stainless steel screws. So that total for this stage has brought me to a subtotal of $787.47. So if I combine that to the previous subtotal, my grand total expense to get to this stage of construction, I can hear that rotten sort of a cockatoo screaming out there. Just one sec. So I combine that with the previous subtotal of $1,251.46 and I get a total build cost of $2,038.93. So I guess you gotta tell me if you think that a 2.4, don't do that, a 2.4 by 1.2 by 70 centimeter high aquarium, including the timber stand that it sits on, is good value for $2,038. Now I'm going to consider that $2,038 to be the final build cost of this aquarium. Don't get me wrong, I've still got plenty of money, unfortunately, to spend on the filtration, the plumbing and the aquascaping of this aquarium. But the reason I'm going to call the $2,038 as the final build cost is that hopefully what we have now, hopefully, is a watertight aquarium on its own timber stand. And you can actually follow along and continue to follow along with my build journey, or you could do yourself your own Fleetwood Mac and go your own way. So what actually is involved from now that might make your journey a little bit different to mine? And I guess the main one is actually going to be filtration. So I'm actually going to run sump filtration on this aquarium. And so to do that, I need to install an overflow system. So the next stage for me after I finish doing my water test is to actually drill the holes or cut the holes in the rear of the aquarium, build an overflow box, install the bulkheads so that water can flow down to the actual sump. Now I feel like in this size aquarium, a sump filter is probably one of the most, thank you Reggie, one of the most sensible types of filtration system just because of the sheer water volume. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't actually run canister filters on this aquarium. You couldn't actually pop a pump itself into the actual aquarium and pump the water up to an overhead sump and have it drain back down. You could pump it up to a bog filtration system. So if those were your choices, you wouldn't have to do any drilling or any overflow systems at all. Jesus, a turd.
Yeah.
Now, in the last video, I asked if you have any inquiries, any pieces of information that you want to have a much better look at, then certainly pop your question in the comments and say answer in video. And I did have one inquiry from Andrew Byron who would like to have a closer look at how I joined two pieces of glass in the front of my plywood aquariums, my bigger plywood aquariums, bigger than that one. So this is Palau Reef, and it has two 1.8 metre or 6 foot panes of glass across the front. This is my good old estuary aquarium. It also has two 6 foot panes of glass across the front. And I'm not going to go outside too far because I've got a cockatoo on my shoulder, but that is, a bit hard to see, my turtle aquarium, which is exactly the exact same size as Palau Reef, and it also has two 6 foot panes of glass across the front. You can see a common theme. You'll see what I've done is I've actually bridged the junction between those two panes of glass with a glass strip on the inside, siliconed of course, and I've actually bridged the junction between the two panes of glass on the outside with an aluminium strip, or in the case of the good old estuary, that crappy wooden board, siliconed in place, of course. So what I'm basically doing is sandwiching the joint between those two panes of glass with the internal glass strip and the external metal or timber strip. And that's it. That's it. It doesn't seem like a lot considering the, I guess, the size of that viewing side of the aquarium. But what you've got to keep in mind is that the actual glass itself is locked in place into that rebate at the bottom of the aquarium, just like the rebate that I showed you when I was building my Gold Coast Seaway Aquarium. So the glass can't go anywhere at the bottom because of that rebate. The top of this pane and the top of this pane is also locked in alignment with each other by the fact that it's contained within the one continuous, in this case, aluminium bracing system. So these two panes of glass can't really go anywhere in relation to each other. Remember that this tank here, and the one that's outside, which is my turtle tank, are actually made out of tempered glass, and tempered glass is 4 times stronger than float glass. This aquarium here, which also has been bridged, if I can show you the glass strip on the inside, there it is down there. This is float glass. This is actually a 6 by 2 by 2 foot aquarium that I stripped the back out of and the front out of and used it to make the one long side of this aquarium. So it's float glass, but it's only 60 centimeters high. I don't think that I would wish to do this style of joining the two panes of glass to that depth, which is 80 centimeters, if I was just using float glass. Heat soaked and tempered glass is a lot stronger. I'm sure there'll be some people out there that will judge whether or not that is actually sufficient, but I guess proof is in the pudding. My turtle tank outside's been running for 2 years now. Palau Reef has been running for, I don't actually know, about 9 months, 8 months. And there was a question there, do I have any actual additional bracing to support that join? And I guess you could say yes. I make sure that there's this cross brace front to back directly in line where the glass joint itself is there. Thanks, Andrew. Don't forget, if you've got any questions or any updates that you want to actually have a good close look at, to pop that question down in the comment section and just say answer in video, and I'll do my best to actually give you a good close look at whatever it is that you want to have a good close look at. I'm really hoping I won't have to put a cross brace from the front to the rear of the aquarium. I'm really hoping that this is sufficient to keep the actual structural integrity of the tank, but obviously if there is some sort of movement, some significant movement of this front pane, then I will cross brace it. Now, other than leaks, one of the things I'm really anxious to find out is whether or not there's going to be any outward deflection or bowing in this front pane of glass. I'm going to see, obviously, I'll be able to measure a gap between the string line and where the actual edge of the aluminium will actually fall. You can see, however, in the middle that the actual string line is sitting 5 millimeters on top of the stainless steel, and that's because of that stainless steel was a little bit bowed itself. If you recall from the previous video, I feel like the angle is tilting in slightly, and this is popping outwards ever so slightly, which tells me that the glass is trying to force against this angle. You can obviously see that the actual string line now is not quite on the edge of that aluminium. It's a couple of mils in still, which means that there's been about 3 millimeter of movement that way, out that way, just from the pressure of the water. And the water at the moment is not completely full. We're probably sitting at about 65 centimeters in depth. Now I'm just thinking, if I get this straight edge and I pop it on the actual glass itself, I'll actually be able to see if there's any rocking of it, which means, and there is some rocking. Can you see that little bit of movement? That means the glass is no longer flat and straight. It's actually bowed a little bit. It's not bowed a lot. And I think we're looking at about 2 to 3 millimeters of difference. Now I'm going to leave this now. I'm going to leave this for a few days and hopefully just come back out, and hopefully I won't see any moisture appearing around the timberwork and also on the floor. That will give me a little bit of time to find out what you think. Do you think that you would be happy with about 2 to 3 millimeters of bowing in that front pane of glass, or would you be more happy installing a front to back cross brace? I guess we've got two options: a piece of stainless steel flat bar that's bolted in place, or potentially even a stainless steel cable, a bit like you'd see in yachts and balustrading. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Australian Aquarist.